Welcome to the Good Man Paradigm. My name's Imogen Hobbs. I am your host. I'm also the men's coach and founder of Change Channel Coaching. Tonight, I was supposed to be interviewing Cindy. She is an epic business coach based in Adelaide, but just a little while ago, we got notice that she had a power outage and is unable to join me. So we are just winging it on the fly right now. And I've got a new thing that I'm exploring, talking about and understanding, and I really wanted to bring that to you. So I figured lots of people really like, lots of the men, particularly in my Change Channel community arena where I free coach once a month, really enjoy the tangents that we go on. So I thought I would bring one of those fresh tangents to this space. So this is live. You can comment. I will receive your comments and see them, so I can, if you've got any parts of this that you want to question, you want me to talk into, you want to challenge, you find interesting, then please pop your comments in so that I can jump into those as we go. But what I really wanted to, or the conversation that I really want to start opening up and really want to start talking about is an appetite for feeling. And so what I mean by that is when we experience trauma and when we go through traumatic experiences, particularly when we're young and when we're small, then the desensitization of subtle feelings, the feelings at the top range of what we have. So like love and joy and fun and playfulness, mischievousness, curiosity, exploration, like those sorts of feelings that sit in what I would just for now refer to as like the subtle top range of feelings, the things that are more quiet, more subtle to feel, more enjoyable, more pleasant, more pleasurable, more soft. That when you experience some level of trauma at any time in your life, and particularly when you're young and you're formulating your understanding of the world and how things work and how you operate in the world, then that sort of takes away or it puts you into this place where we look for extremes. We look for depth. We look for things to be raw and I'm trying to think of what the word is that I'm looking for. We look for things to be some level of extreme, some level of deep. We look for exaggeration. We look for high frequency, like something has to be impactful. It has to be potent. It has to be rich in flavor, in feeling, in experience. And so we look for things that are dramatic. We look for things that are exciting. We look for things that hurt. We look for things that impact us in deeper ways so that we can feel something. Because when you go through that level of trauma and a traumatic experience, and everyone's version of trauma is different. I was actually recording a different podcast earlier today for someone that can't join me live, and we were talking about, like not feeling or not having trauma, like the thought of, I don't have any trauma, nothing terribly bad happened to me in my life. I had good parents, they loved me. It wasn't so bad, nothing extremely bad happened, but everyone's experience of that is relative to their own life and their own experience. So I like the example, which is, if the worst thing that's ever happened to you in your life is that someone gets your coffee order wrong, then that's going to be a really bad day for you. That could create an entirely bad day. But if the worst thing that's happened in your life is that you were abused as a child, someone getting your coffee order wrong is going to be a blip on the map, like it's not even, it's going to be like, oh, don't even worry about it. It's totally fine. And you get on with it. And so I want to make the point of saying that, like your life's experience is relative to you and only you. And so I've had people say, like, oh, well, I was sexually abused, but it wasn't anything like what you went through. And I'm like, it doesn't matter, right? It's relative to your life's experience. And so when you go through and you start to look at what desensitized you in what way, at what point in your life, then we start to look at that appetite for feeling and appetite for depth, which is particularly for people who have experienced extensive trauma in some ways, often go for things in their lives that are really challenging, really hard, really brutal, really extreme in some way. And we can start to have a look at, or I'm starting to explore, really, what does it take to get back to the subtle feelings? Like, as a person who's been through a lot of that myself, and particularly I'm quite open about sharing this around my journey and the sexual abuse that I went through between the ages of 10 and 15, and what my life's experience was in that way. And prior to that, moving country when I was 6 years old. And so, like, there's a lot of things that create a level of intensity there that mean that as a child, you're in some level of like fight and flight. You're in some survival mode to manage, to make it through, to stay level in some way. And so there's a lot of things that get impacted in that time. But the thing that I really am getting super curious about right now is this appetite for feeling. And so when everything happens and it brings you down into extreme feelings, loss, heartache, heartbreak, abuse, trauma, all of those survival, fight, flight, when you're in those states on a regular basis, then what appetite do you have, and what capacity do you have to feel things that are subtle on the surface, like fun, like joy, like pleasure, like connection, like love, right? Like, what appetite do we have for those things? Because they don't have the dopamines. They don't have those strings attached to them that say, like, this is going to give you something. It's subtle. It's almost boring when you've lived in a life of extreme, when you've lived in, like, lives on the edge. So I've got clients and things like that have been competitive fighters, that have been in bikie gangs, that have been drug addicts, that have been alcoholics, that have been survivors of child abuse, right? Like, there's a whole different variation of impacts that can change this, or that can create the way that you measure the world, the way that you receive the world, and the receptivity to feeling worthy, feeling like you belong, feeling like you're important, feeling like you're of value, and the connection between what you formulated your understanding of the world to be. I've got some clients that say, like, I had a really good childhood, but actually now that I reflect, like, mum was a bit narcissistic and I didn't really ever know whether I was doing something right. So I would behave in this way and it would be all right one day, and then the next day it wasn't all right. And then I would behave in this way to counteract that. And that was never quite, so you're always on eggshells and you're always trying to figure out, like, how to behave, what's acceptable, what's going to be accepted, and what's going to trigger a reaction. And that causes a level of trauma, because now you're in survival, you're in that fight flight, you're in that, like, unpredictable reality, which means I can't just be a kid and play. I can't just be a kid and be curious. I can't just go out there and, be innocent in the world, because I've got this, like, is it going to be okay? At what point is it going to fly off the handle? And how am I going to manage that? And what that's bringing in for me is look at this, like, desensitization and the upper range of feelings that we lose. And so then I'm watching clients currently who are becoming fathers, right? And they've gone through that, and I'm watching how that plays out. And they're just becoming fathers and developing this appetite for the more sensitive feelings, because when you watch your young child walk for the very first time, then, like, that's subtle, that's joy, that's this beautiful, warm, fuzzy feeling of pride, of safety, of connection, of security, of love. And those things are more subtle. And so what happens when you start to develop that, or you start to step into that without the awareness, because then it feels like this isn't safe. Like I can't go here because I don't know how to hold these feelings. So, well, a lot of the work that we're doing and a lot of the work that I've done over the last 15 years on myself is to develop this understanding of like, how do we get back up to these more, this higher range of more subtle, more beautiful feelings that are gentle, that are loving, that are warm, that are fun, playful, curious, all of those things. And I, for one, have been putting the pieces together. And again, if anyone's joining me right now, I really appreciate you hanging out with me. Please jump in the comments and ask questions, hang out with me, interact with me. I would love that. My guest tonight had to cancel because she had a power outage. So we're winging it. So hang out with me and wing it. I would love to hear, or just know that you're there in the comments. And if you haven't already, please like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. That really helps us to bring more of these conversations to you guys out there. And that's really what I want to expose with this this podcast, is just real life conversations and real life experiences and real life perspectives in a really organic and raw way. So your support helps. But one of the things that I'm exploring right now is this, like this mentality that says, I'm not fun. My life wasn't fun. As kids, we didn't go and do fun things. It was always quite serious. We were not, like we were quite low income. So we had reduced ability to be able to do fun things. So I grew up on stations. I grew up fishing and surf casting. I grew up hunting. I grew up out in the desert in outback South Australia. And so the exposure out there was quite isolated. It was quite raw. It was very rugged, and it wasn't very gentle. It wasn't playful. It wasn't curious. And I was exposed to a lot of things that weren't great, including community and the way that people operate. And so, I look at that story and that thread that's woven through of like that I'm not fun. I don't know how to have fun. I'm not really sure what is fun for me, and looking at exploring and playing through that and figuring that out to develop the appetite for feeling, for understanding a higher range of emotional depth. Because again, when we do experience those traumas, when we do experience a life of hardship, right? What if you had you lost someone at a young age, and that flipped who you were, that flipped how you respond, that flipped how you behave in the world. And then you go out and you just work, and you go day after day, and you build a life that is safe because you're working, that's bringing in money, you're hardworking, you're reliable, you're trustworthy. But like the echoes of people who I trust just leave, or people lied to me, those things can weave their way through your life and create a desensitization to the way that you feel things, because there's a level of risk involved between what you're able to go towards. Because if you go towards this, then that has relationship or friendship or connection or depth, or love, then there can be a risk in that, because you loved someone and they died, or they killed themselves, or they, a family member left or something, your parents left. And so you're your father left or your mother left or something like that. And you've got like those abandonment wounds in there. That creates a risk around love. And love is in that higher range of feelings. It's in that subtle state. And so when love becomes risky, when connection becomes risky, you isolate, you become self-determined, you become, I certainly did, and I know a lot of the men in my groups do, have become, like the problem solver, the dependable one, the person who can fix everything, the one who's always available, the person who's people-pleasing and got lots of capacity for everyone else and feels like they're drowning on the inside, because we're missing we're missing that range of feelings. We're missing a level of exposure and experience to what, like a huge part of the human experience. Because we're stuck down here in this, it has to be some level of extreme. It has to be busy. It has to be fast. It has to be hard. It has to be difficult for us to do. It has to, like, we can only get the level of achievement and the dopamine response based on us being able to conquer a task, conquer a relationship, conquer a gym goal, right? There's this level of extremity that means that you're constantly pushing, you're constantly striving, you're constantly achieving, because if you slow down, when you sit with yourself, when you confront yourself, when you face yourself, that's where that subtle range of feeling is. And that's terrifying because it's risky and it's exposing and it makes us feel vulnerable and it makes us feel like we could be attacked at any point, or the rug could be pulled out from underneath you because this isn't safe. Because the memory that's woven into that is that when I allowed this, when I trusted like this, when I stepped to people and when I let them in, they always proved me right. They always proved that they weren't what they said they were. They always proved that they couldn't meet the values or the standards that they said that they were bringing into this world. And that can be for people that have been through trauma and the influence of like neurodivergence in that as well, which is that trauma response and the, constantly looking for threats in some of it, and the understanding or the inability to understand the innuendos of the world. When those things are at play, we kind of get put back to this: if it's not 100% real, if it's not 100% honest, if it's not all of these things, then I don't believe it. And if it can't be all of those things, then I can't, it's going to prove that it's not safe. It's going to prove that it's not trustworthy. It's going to prove that I was right about my expression or my experience of the world and what I thought it to be and how it had let me down, or how it had failed me. And I think that there's a real opportunity, and I particularly am seeing this with my clients who are neurodivergent, who have been at war for most of their lives, who have been running for most of their lives. I'm particularly starting to see that change within them as they put the weapons down, as they start to sit with themselves, as they start to feel more comfortable in who they are and being in their body, rather than, I don't know if some of you have known this feeling, but it's like this feeling of, I want to escape myself. I want to, like for me, when I was younger, it was always, I wanted to crawl out of my skin and run away. That's the really clear memory in my mind, and a really clear phrasing in my mind, is I just wanted to get out, claw my way out, and I wanted to run away. I didn't want to be in this body. I didn't want to be in this experience. And that's not, I was never, I just want to make this really clear, like I was never suicidal. That was not what that thought was. I just felt like I was so detached from myself. And I know lots of clients that have been through this. They feel like they're opposing themselves. They're detached, and it doesn't quite line up, or they're all in their mind, and it's just so much doubt and so much questioning, and the devil on your shoulder, or I've got a client who just constantly says about the leprechaun on his shoulder, always challenging, always questioning, always shifting the, like, is this right? What do I have to offer? Why would I do this? What's the value in it? And that self-sabotage of like, oh, I'm gonna do this. And actually, this is a really important piece, because I was having this conversation with some of the guys in one of my group programs the other night around like starting the business, but then not knowing if you like the business, because there's all of these aspects of admin and social media and putting yourself out there and accounting, and there's all of these things that they don't really like. And I said, well, do you like the trade job and how that makes you feel, or do you prefer to be coaching and working with people and helping them to understand themselves and regulate and understand their feelings? And he said, oh, definitely the coaching and the regulation piece. And I'm like, well, so why would you stay over here in this one? You're at the beginning of this new experience that feels good for you, but it feels good when you're in the moment, when you're doing the thing, because that's giving you the dopamine, that's giving you the elation, that's giving you the feel good feelings of like, I'm making a difference in someone's lives. Look how they're understanding themselves, or look at the experience that they're having. I know for myself, when I get off a coaching call at nighttime, I'm like ready to conquer the world, because it gives you all of that dopamine feedback, because that's my genius. That's the place where I thrive. And so what we're looking at is, when you're starting a business, or when you're starting something new, when you're building your life after waking up to all of this, there's all of the boring bits around the outside that don't provide the dopamine. They don't provide the depth of feeling. They don't provide the excitement. They don't provide the challenge. They're just boring. And so we go like, oh, well, I don't know if I like all of this, because I love this component, but I don't love all of these other parts. And that's the challenge around, I think, a really big influence of trauma in your life, and of the reactions and responses that you have based on your understanding of the world and your experience. And I don't know a lot of people that have had just, a life that was super easy, that wasn't up and down, and they didn't have some sort of level of or layer of events that impacted them in some way. And so when you have that, when you have the something that, again, like I said before, it's relative to your life's experience. So when you've had something that's created that impact in your life, then what we're chasing is those feelings. We're chasing those levels of extreme feeling, of depth, of richness, of fullness, of, like, this is, I'm doing something and it's having an impact. Yes. And that drives that dopamine response. But then what about when we have to do all of the other responsible things around the outside? And that's the appetite for feeling. And I think that it's not just around, like our sensitivity to feeling emotions. I think it's also around our ability to manage or navigate tasks, to be able to do things in our lives that aren't always super pleasing, or aren't always fulfilling, or aren't always achievement orientated. Like, what happens when you have neurodivergence and you have trauma responses, and you also have to get something done that you don't like? Generally, there's a solid amount of procrastination, and I'll clean the house, and I'll mow the lawns, and I'll go out, and I'll go for a walk, and I'll get the groceries done, and I'll food prep, and I'll solve a million other problems so that I can avoid that one thing that I don't want to do, because all of this around the outside still gives us that level of achievement. And it means that we get to say, like, I wasn't being lazy. I wasn't letting myself down. I succeeded at all of these things, which fulfills that dopamine response. It fulfills that need for a depth of feeling of, like, pushing yourself. So I know, for instance, for me, one of the things that I'll do if I'm not feeling focused, or if I feel like I've been coaching all week and I've had a really big week, I'll go and make some jewelry, because that puts me into a different state of mind where I can just, like, do something practical. I can think about something in a methodical way that is to solve my own problem, really, but to make something, to construct something, to work with metal, and to, work with tools and work with my hands, which changes the way that my brain is operating, changes the way that I practically look at the world. But it also just takes me out of that state, out of that, like, procrastination or avoidance, and gives me some level of stability, I think, in terms of what I'm exposed to in my daily and in my week. And so, where are the ways in your day, in your week, in your business, in your personal life, that you can bring in and thread in some of those things that are really like, bring you back to a level of yourself, bring you back to a level of things that you enjoy. I wouldn't really say that I wouldn't think out there that jewelry was fun, but for me it kind of is, because I get to do things with my hands, and I get to make something really beautiful, and I get to come away and go like, this is cool. I made this thing and it's awesome. So where are the opportunities to weave those into your day so that you can still get those, like more subtle feelings without having to chase the height of achievement, chase the extremes of I had to conquer the world today, or I had to fight the world today, or I had to confront the world today. And so if you're bringing a business in, if you're trying to do something that you love, like how can you weave in so that you get, coaching, maybe if that's what you're doing. I've got clients that are moving into that space, but if you can coach, like once a day, so you're still getting that like touch with the thing that makes you feel the dopamine or get the dopamine response, but you can also moderate the other things that are more subtle. And I think it's our, like we're looking at our tolerance for bringing those feelings in, bringing our ability to navigate those tasks in life, right? Like how do you do that with your partner? Like just sit quietly and connect, because that's that higher range of emotions, right? Like that's the more subtle emotions. So how do you sit quietly together and enjoy each other's company? How do you just make time to just watch your kids play without having any need to interfere or intervene or even be part of it necessarily, but just to watch and allow yourself to feel those subtle range of emotions? Where in your life do you create space for yourself to slow down, to take the tension off the spring? I feel like generally we operate in our lives like a coiled up spring, and it's like every experience that you go through in your life that puts added stress or friction, or difficulty or drama or chaos or trauma into your life. Every time we go through those experiences, we're just putting a bit more tension on that spring. And every time you stay in a job that you don't enjoy, that doesn't give you anything back, you're just winding up that spring. And every time you spend your days being busy, overworking and managing everyone else's expectations and doing what everyone wants of you and fixing everyone else's problems all of the time and getting to the end of the day and going like, fuck, where did my day go? We put more tension on that spring. We put more friction in our space, in our minds, in our bodies, and in that level of detachment from ourselves. And so every time you create a bit more space in your calendar or your diary, every time you ask someone, do you want me to solve the problem for you, or do you just want to vent? Do you just want me to listen? Every time you ask those questions and you start to reclaim some of those parts of yourself, or some of those some of the time in your day, then you get that opportunity to sit in the more subtle range of feeling, the more subtle range of who you are and of how you got there. But that place is the difficult place, right? Like that's the place that we're all avoiding. That's the place that most of my clients are avoiding. Like, what happens when I'm quiet? Because when I'm quiet, I don't know how to manage that, because I know how to manage the chaos. I know how to manage the drama and the chaos of life. I know how to manage all of these extreme things, but I have no tools for this quiet place over here, this subtle place. It's unfamiliar territory. So I do not want to go there under any circumstance. And I see this play out so much. I've seen it play out in my own life. And like I said, I've been working on this for like 15 years now to understand and to develop that curiosity. I've had to work really hard on my impulse, because patience is probably the hardest thing that I've ever learned in my life. But that need to have the answer, the need to be able to fix something for someone, the need to be able to jump in there and just get it done, and to talk over people, and to and I still have moments where I do that for sure. But like the tolerance or the exploration of self, to be able to ask yourself, like, am I trying to add value here, or am I trying to validate myself? Like I go into training rooms now and I have that cue in my head of like, value or validation. Am I speaking to add value to this group, or am I speaking to validate myself that I have a reason or a right to be here? And that's been a huge, huge change. And so when we look at this, like I can manage chaos, I can manage drama, I can manage extreme feelings, or so that I don't have to sit over here in the quiet because I don't know what to do with it. I don't know where to put it. I don't know how to manage it. And it makes me feel uncomfortable. I mean, how many of you feel really uncomfortable when everything's slow and quiet and you don't have anywhere to be? How quick are you to jump on your phone and start scrolling aimlessly? How quick are you to find something to clean, to tidy, to build, to manage, to work on? How quick are you to get into watching TV so that you don't have to be alone with your thoughts? Because, most of the time when we've gone through some level of trauma, we are trying to make sure that the world is sturdy around us, which means that you have to be constantly moving, and at no point can you stay still, which is why you make your life so busy, and why we are looking for that depth of feeling, that depth of achievement, that, like, I have a right to be here, I can add value. See, this is how I show you that I can add value and I can fix the problems. If you guys are tuning in live, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. I would love to hear if you've got any questions or if there's any of this conversation that you want me to open up in any way. If you want to challenge some of the things that I'm saying, I would love that. But if there's anything that you want me to talk about, please jump in the comments and let me know, or just say hi. That would be awesome as well. I just, as an update, my guest for tonight had to cancel last minute as a power outage. So we are a bit winging it. And this is a conversation that's been brewing in me for a little while now around our appetite for feeling after experiencing trauma, and how neurodivergence. Hi, Ricky. Yay. I thought you would love this conversation. And how the trauma that we go through and things like that, how that impacts our ability to feel and our ability to understand what we're feeling and what we're avoiding. And I think generally, like the most when you grow up in trauma, the most unsafe feeling is love. And I think, as a human, in a human experience, being able to think about that, like everyone in relationships, all the men that I work with, there's not any of the men that I work with that are single, that don't want to be in a relationship, that don't want to find someone that is safe, that they can have a beautiful connection with, right? Like, we're human. We want to experience that. That's part of our experience. We're not designed to be in isolation. But what happens when you experience trauma and love becomes risky? How do you recreate that in your life? And why would you attract a really loving relationship and a really safe relationship? Some people do, and that's stunning, right? Like, some there's people that do, and that's a really beautiful opportunity to move through that. But for a lot of people, you recreate traumatic relationships because your understanding of love, or your appreciation of love, is difficulty, is challenge, is intensity, is extreme feelings, is risk, is not feeling safe. And so the idea that we would, you only know what you know, and if we are like magnets, which we are, right? We're magnetic, and so we're programmed with whatever information is in our experience. So you attract what you know, not what you want. Like, manifestation's beautiful. It's a really great concept, but manifestation is only words if there aren't actions to back that up. And when you're looking at attracting people into your life, then if you think, I want someone who's done a lot of work on themselves, who understands themselves, who's healed, I hear it a lot, I want a healed relationship, then motherfucker, you got a lot of work to do, right? Like, because for you to be able to meet that person, or to be able to hold that and not throw it away, and not have a tantrum, and not be scared of it, and not sabotage it in some way, which is what happens, then you have to do the actions on yourself to prepare yourself to be ready to receive that relationship when it comes in. Because mostly what happens is, and I see this a lot for women, right? Like women say, I want a man who's going to, like take me out for dinner and make the decisions and take the lead and all of those beautiful things that would be amazing. But then he comes in and she goes, no, I can do it for myself. I can get the car door. No, I can do that. Oh, I can fix this. No, I don't need you to do that. I can get it for myself. Don't worry about it. And women get really uncomfortable about people doing things for them, which is that response. That's the, I want this, but I don't know how to have this because I've spent my whole life on the defense, me against the world kind of thing, that builds up what we would call like, your walls or the barriers between you and the rest of the world so that you can keep yourself safe and keep those things out because love's not safe because of all of these things that happen when you're a child. So it's your job. I hear so many people, particularly men, wanting relationships, wanting someone who's safe, who doesn't do all of the things that they've experienced in the past. But if the it's you. It is you. If the relationships are the same and you don't do any work on yourself, you're the common denominator. It's you. Like, you have to work on yourself to understand a different level of capacity, a different way of functioning, a different way of understanding, and a different way of feeling in yourself so that you can invite that in. Because then there is an exceptional amount of work to do together. You don't get someone who's healed. The healing happens, the next layer of healing, the next evolution of that, the next experience of that happens when you're together and you move through that together. And so again, my guest that I recorded an episode earlier today, my guest was talking about the difference about being with someone who is also working on themselves, because then you're inviting each other and you're walking together, but you do the work on yourselves separately. But then that means that you can meet, you can communicate, you can have a different level of conversation. So rather than, you did this and you did that and you have to apologize first and fuck you, I'm not talking to you and I'm out. Rather than that, which is that extreme sensitivity, right? That's extreme emotions, and that's that dramatic, chaotic, like I've got to fight for this and it's got to be all of this extreme something to confirm my beliefs about the world. When you understand that and you unpack that and you start to put some of that down, you develop some of this, appetite for the higher range of emotions. You get to broach conversations quietly. You get to discuss things. You get to say, sit with your partner and say, hey, just before we get into this, like, did you just want me to listen to you? Or like, are you venting and you just want to get this out? Did you just want me to listen? Or do you want me to help you fix this? And I think, like I've watched so many men in my programs go out and go like, I'm going to say that to my wife and she's going to be like, who the fuck are you and where did you come from? But they're using that. I've got CEOs of construction companies that are using that in the office now. Like, people come to them with their problems and they've always been available. And now they're saying like, do you want me to fix your problem for you? Or do you just want to vent? And if they say, I just want to vent, you can go, I don't have capacity for that right now. Right? Or, you can, if they say they want you to fix it for them, you can say, well, I have capacity at this time. Right? But if you say that to a partner, that puts them in a position to take responsibility for what they're then doing. And the next level up from that is when we understand more about ourselves and we get that depth and we get the range. So we get that higher ranges of emotions. We get to the point where we go into self-ownership, which is, or radical self-responsibility, which is, hey, I really just need to vent about something. Do you have capacity to listen? I don't need you to fix anything. Like, that provides an entirely different emotional landscape for relationships. But that requires you to prepare yourself and to do the work on yourself to be able to sustain and hold that and to not run scared of it. Because if you ran away from home when you were 15, then, and you've been running ever since, then you're going to run away when the emotions come in, because the risk is that people will get too close to you, and that will make you vulnerable, because when you were young, people proved to you that they didn't love you, and so you ran away from it, right? And we're just reconfirming our story of belief. And so, like, how many times in your life can you look at, like, you got a good job, and then somehow you managed to sabotage your good job, or you had a great relationship and somehow you managed to fuck it up, or I'm sure that we've all got times where we can look back and go like, fuck, I really did that, like that was really good, and I left it, I lost it. And having a look at taking responsibility for that, like, why did I attract these experiences in? We're magnetic. You only know what you know. You attract what you know. And you'll attract what you know until it creates enough friction for you to decide that it's time to change it, that it's time to do something different, because you don't want to keep repeating that story or that cycle anymore. I mean, how many times have you gone like, why does this shit keep happening to me? Why do I keep experiencing this? Why does this keep happening in my life? Why can't it be different? You have to be different. That's your responsibility. I think that my personal opinion is the bigger the trauma, the bigger the experience, the more important the mission that you're on in this life. So the more development that you have to get through, and the more of the victimhood that you have to confront. This always happens to me. Why me? I can't do it because of this. This always happens. This gets in the way. This is broken. This doesn't work. Like all of the reasons why we can't. That victim state of woe is me, it's so hard for me, it was harrowing, you wouldn't understand what I went through. Sure, it's relative to your experience. The bigger the trauma, I personally, this is just my belief, the bigger the trauma, the bigger the mission in this life, the more important the thing is that you have to do. And that's why there's such a huge threshold for you to have to cross to get from being the victim of trauma to, turning your pain into power, for, at risk of being cliche, right? But that is passion, that is purpose. It is, I think, locked in within the difficulty, the pressure cooker of like, you have to earn it. I think you have to, hello, I think that's Artie. Thank you. I just put that on the screen. Hi Artie. And we got Ricky as well. Ricky jumped in and said hi. You have to earn it. You have to fight for the life that you want to have. And at risk of contradicting myself, that fight is often slowing down. That fight is often putting the war away. But you have to confront yourself to be able to do that. And so that's the challenge. That's the harrowing aspect. That's the heartbreak. That's the heartache. That is you are your biggest obstacle and your single greatest opportunity in this world. And I invite all of you to have a look at yourself. Have a look at if this episode has brought up some things for you, some realities for you, some concepts for you that you want to think about around, like, where do I make excuses, like I'm not fun, or like I don't do subtle things, or I don't do playful things, or I'm not curious about the world. Like I talk to the guys all of the time about, you have a problem or you have an opportunity, but you do not have both. You can't have both at the same time. You can't be focused on something being a problem and find the opportunity in it, right? So we need to either be opportunistic, be curious around, what does this mean for me? What is this teaching me? What can I learn from this situation? And how can I use this to my advantage? Or we can look at, that sucks, like this has gotten in the way of all of these things that I had planned. This has changed everything, right? Like this podcast is a great example of that. My guest was like, last minute, I can't make it on because there's a power outage. That can, to me, I was in a moment of like, who could I call? Who could I get to jump in last minute? And I was like, I don't have enough time to prepare someone else. There's only 15 minutes. I'll do it myself. That's fine. I've got this conversation that needs to come out. This is the perfect time for it, right? Problem or opportunity. But you wasn't always like that. You do have to develop the skills to be open to that, to practice that, right? Someone said to one of the guys in my phase 1 program said the other night, about boundaries. And I realized that I don't have boundaries, and I don't have any good boundaries, and I don't have strong boundaries for sure. And I feel like I should be better at that. And I was like, if you've just realized that and you haven't practiced that in your life, how would you be good at it? Setting boundaries is a skill. Communication is a skill. Self-awareness is a skill. Like, these are things that you have to learn. They're practical tools that you need to learn. But it's not something that's easy, right? Like, those conversations in the beginning are messy, they're challenging, they are uncomfortable, right? I still have challenging and uncomfortable conversations about setting boundaries sometimes. It's part of human nature, and around us asserting ourselves or taking authority for ourselves and believing in what do we want, what are the standards and what are the values that we want to represent in our lives, that we want to have more of, that we want to inspire or impact or create more of, and more opportunity and more exposure to in our lives. And the invitation in that is to believe in yourself, to want to be yourself, to want to, enact something in the world, to bring something to life, to be passionate about something, or feel like you have a right to be here and something to offer, even if that's just you in your current state. Like, that's a skill. You have to develop that skill. You have to work on that. Like, again, 15 years deep of investment into personal development, into understanding, into learning, into exploring, into navigating, into experimenting, into delivery. You just get deeper layers. You get more understanding, you get more awareness, you get more patience, you get more appetite for feeling the subtle, beautiful feelings of life, which is boredom, right? That is about being able to do boring things. Doesn't always feel good, doesn't always feel super nice, but how do we adapt our tolerance to a broader range of emotions? How do we develop our appetite for feeling? I would love to know, if you're watching this in the replay, I would love to know in the comments how you, what this brought up for you, or if you have an experience that this has made loud for you, or a challenge around this perspective, or any of those things. I would love to hear that. This is always an open conversation. We are here to learn. We are here to express. We are here to understand ourselves. As always, I'm just offering my opinion, which is developed over my 15 years worth of personal development and that exploration, and working with, at last count, 786 clients over the past 4 years. So I am always open to the challenge of the conversation and to different perspectives, and to being able to open it up even more, because I think that is how we thrive as humans. By having that dialogue, by having that conversation, by exploring and experimenting. So please pop it in the comments. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe on YouTube. I would really appreciate your support so that we can bring more conversations like this into the world. Thank you so much for those of you who have joined my Winging It Thursday night. This has been the Good Man Paradigm, and I will be back again next week for a live conversation with another guest. Thank you all so much.